learning to look at symbols. A culture can be likened to a quilt of intricate geometrical design in which all of the many colored pieces, their shapes and stitching flow into one another, constitute the whole. This analogy is apt for a second reason. Often, the design on the upper side of the quilt is different from the undersurface pattern. Still, the undersurface design is essential for the outward surface appearance. I have given myself the task of decoding the culture in which I find myself in time and space. That culture is the dominating global power system, culture of white supremacy. This decoding amounts to turning over, examining and laying bare the intricate pattern pieces underlying the culture and power system, showing in sharp relief its lines of force and determination, and thus its overall design. Only by so doing is it possible to see where we are going in the existing dense white fog. Counter-racist psychiatry defines mental health as patterns of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception consciously practiced by the victims of white supremacy, with the objective of eradicating racism at the global level. Functionally speaking, for the victims of white supremacy, this means to act in a self-group respecting and supporting manner in all areas of people activity, despite the specific conditions of racist domination and oppression. Submission to and cooperation with victimization and oppression are signs of individual or group mental illness or self-negation. Once the victims of oppression accurately and completely decode the system and its objective of oppression, and once they fully analyze the symbols and patterns of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, and perception that constitute the system, the oppressed will be able to reorganize their own behavior effectively. This reorganization will result in group respect and support, and thereby end their oppression. The process of decoding a power system and its culture is a necessary first step to achieve behavioral mastery over that system culture. The attainment of such mastery is an essential step in the process of total liberation for the victims who wish to end that oppression and regain their self-respect and mental health. Without this process of decoding, the oppressed fail to fully understand what they are dealing with. They have minimal levels of consciousness and group respect, and they are, functionally speaking, mentally ill. This decoding activity entails the unraveling and analysis of all the various products of individual and collective brain activity within the given culture. These brain products appear and are reflected in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. This means analyses of products of conscious, as well as unconscious brain activity patterns of logic, thought, speech, action, emotional response, perception, dreams, symbols, and intuition will be required. Of special importance are the brain products that issue forth from those who are white and who presently control the power balance in the global power system of white supremacy, and who thus produce the dominant themes and trends within the system and cultural framework. Symbols are highly abstracted, condensed, and coded messages that are developed by the activity of the brain computer in the human organism. These messages are developed and evolved from energy data received in the brain from the external environment. Various lines of energy data form the total environmental coverage on the brain computer via the nervous system, which can then, under the proper circumstances, lead to the development of a symbol. Thus, symbols reflect certain aspects of the external environment and the total body's internal environmental response to the external environment. Musical notes on paper, as well as written and spoken words, are symbols. There are other kinds of symbols that are not as immediately translated or fully understood because of their highly abstract forms and complexity. The impact of these complex symbols reach subconscious and unconscious levels of brain activity. These complex symbols are, in effect, full sentences, paragraphs, or entire books of data, stated in a highly abstracted single image or line configuration. Once the symbol is formed, it is capable of acting upon the brain computer, which receives it as an energy or data message. This message affects the end product of behavior as carried forth in any area of human activity. The symbol, in turn, acts upon the external environment. These single picture sentences or single picture paragraphs commence in the brain computer and act as powerful undetected persuaders, and thus as powerful determinants of behavioral patterns. These complex symbols are usually related to the deepest cultural themes of a people and have significant messages to convey about the people's and culture's reason for being. Furthermore, These reasons are passed on uncensored in the unconscious via the total environmental experience from the beginning of people time, generation to generation. In this manner, the symbols act as a stirring rod that agitates the unconscious, sending out energy responses in the form of thought, speech, action, and emotions. In the opinion of the Hindu philosopher Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, symbolism is the art of thinking in images, an art now lost to civilized man. However, this loss, as anthropology and psychoanalysis has shown, is limited to consciousness and not to the unconscious, which to compensate is perhaps now overloaded with symbolic material. He goes on to state, to know the rational and the deeply irrational is the mark of truthful living, that is, a fully alive perception of the conditions of one's life. The major forms of symbolism in a power system, culture constitute powerful and subtle messages about how and why the culture came into being and what the people must do to survive and maintain itself. Symbolism is thus the glue that holds the individual and collective psyche of the people and its culture together. The keys to the system culture are found in the decoded symbolism of that system culture, symbols and brain process. Carl Gustav Jung was the major European behavioral scientist to emphasize the importance of symbols, their production, and their meaning in the brain's total process and behavioral output. Nevertheless, his massive volume of work has taken a lesser place to that accorded Sigmund Freud in the late 19th and 20th centuries of Western thought. However, it should be remembered that the understanding and use of symbols reached their highest development in African and Asian cultures, and was of major significance in these cultures dating back to the earliest time, long before there was any European cultural development. According to Jung, the symbol is the primitive expression to the unconscious, but at the same time it is also an idea, corresponding to the highest intuition produced by consciousness. Additionally, in his work Psyche and Symbols, he had the following to say about symbols. Since the symbol is the most complete expression of that which in any given epoch is as yet unknown, and cannot be replaced by any other statement at the time, it must proceed from the complex and subtle strain of the contemporary psychological atmosphere. Conversely, the effective living symbol must also contain something which is shared by considerable numbers of men. It embraces that which is common to a larger group. Consequently, it must include those primitive elements, emotional and otherwise, whose omnipresence stands beyond all doubt. Only when the symbol comprehends all those and conveys them with ultimate force can it evoke a universal response. Therein resides the powerful and redeeming effect of the living social symbol. Also, it has been said that symbols are always paradoxical, since they contain elements that do not exist in logic. Jung thought that the elements combined within symbols are contradictory only to the logic of consciousness, but that, nonetheless, they conform to a basic reality that eludes conscious thought processes. A genuine symbol is an image which possesses two essential features. It originates within the archetypal ground of the psyche, and secondly, there exists a consciousness to apprehend it. In an article entitled, Contribution of Jungian Psychotherapy Towards Understanding the Creative Process, George Boas states, the beauty of myth and symbolism lies in their synthetic power. They can combine in one presentation disparate elements which would be self-contradictory if put in a declarative sentence. Norman O'Brown in Love's Body has stated, the axis on which world history turns is symbolism. From figura to veritas. Translation, from symbol to truth. The axis of world history is making conscious the unconscious. Brown further states, symbolism is between conscious and unconscious. Jung explains in his book Man and His Symbols, a symbol is a term, a name, or even a picture that may be familiar in daily life, yet that possesses specific connotations in addition to its conventional and obvious meaning. It implies something vague, unknown, or hidden from us. He continues, a word or an image is symbolic when it implies something more than its obvious and immediate meaning. It has a wider unconscious aspect that is never precisely defined or fully explained. He further informs us that as the mind explores the symbol, it is led to ideas that lie beyond the grasp of reason. Jung's work indicates that a true symbol appears only when there is a need to express a thought one cannot openly think, or what is only divined or felt. Recent neurological studies suggest that the silent right cerebral hemisphere is the source of activity leading to phenomena such as symbol formation. Other studies demonstrate that the left cerebral hemisphere seems more concerned with the logical processes of directed, more consciously controlled thinking. By contrast, the activities of the right cerebral hemisphere may be subject to different laws that are, as yet, little understood. In addition, the right and left hemispheres appear capable of independent simultaneous thought. Also, it has been suggested that collaboration of the two contradictory modes associated with right and left hemispheric activity may account for the symbolic process and for creativity. Diagram 1 illustrates the process by which the brain-computer uses sensory data, received from the surrounding environment, to form symbols and other brain-computer products. Clearly, many forms and levels of data messages from the physical and social environment are input in the brain-computer. Some of this sensory data is coded at the level of consciousness. But because of the large scope of unattended perceptions, much of the data is coded at the unconscious levels of brain activity. As some neurologists would state, this data is dispersed between the left and right cerebral hemispheres respectively. For example, within the framework of a given system and culture, certain perceptions may exist that never are acknowledged overtly, and certain ideas, thoughts, concepts, and theories that are uttered rarely, if ever. These perceptions, words, ideas, concepts, and theories that are repressed or channeled into the unconscious level of the brain-computer becomes an entire world of ideas treated as though they never existed in the form of concrete reality. Nonetheless, the data from the environment that is encoded at the unconscious level of the brain-computer actually does not disappear, just as the objective data that produce the repressed ideas and concepts do not disappear. There simply ceases to be a clear focus on this body of data. This repressed data becomes the substratum from which symbols can be formed. As stated previously, the dominant aspect of the total environmental reality on the planet is that the overwhelming majority of people are black, brown, red, and yellow. This fact has created the most fundamental collective preoccupation and perhaps fear in the global white collective, white genetic. Survival, a survival that is threatened by the genetic material contained in the genitals of black and other non-white men. Non-white people are genetically dominant to whites, and thus are potential genetic annihilators of the minority white collective. Due to this fear of white genetic annihilation, the global white collective has evolved, during the last 2,000 years, the global white supremacy system and culture that dominates all black, brown, red, and yellow peoples in the world, determining their behavior in all areas of people activity.